Welcome to Sherapy Sessions, Cutting Toxic Family Ties. My name is Dr. Sherry Campbell, and I'm your host. I am a leading expert in the niche of toxic family abuse, and although my show cannot substitute for therapy, it is a survivor-based show. In me, you're not only going to get an expert, but you're also going to get a survivor, as I have also survived toxic family abuse. I know how hard it is. The goal I have is to give voice to the voiceless, to provide skills to help you to protect your peace, to stand your solid ground, and to navigate and heal the heartbreaks caused by toxic family. Please have a pen and paper available to give voice to your thoughts as you listen to each show. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your bravery. So let the healing begin. Welcome back, everyone, to Sherapy Sessions. Lauren, my guest, and I have had an interesting morning because my power decided to go out like 20 minutes before showtime. It was cute. So like half curly hair. I'm glad I don't look like I had a 5-year-old makeup artist come in and do my makeup. But we are here, and Lauren is amazing, and she's in Thailand, no less. So this was chaotic this morning, but we're here, we're breathing. And Lauren has been, I feel like, a follower of mine for many years and such a support for me and my work. And her and her husband's a therapist, and I'll let Lauren tell you about her. But it's called Flourish Therapy. I mean, what a beautiful word, Lauren, just to flourish. So Lauren obviously is on the show because she has experience in childhood trauma and as it lives out with us throughout our life. And I want her to really give you kind of a bio on who she is and how she came to do what she did. And then we will dive into her own trauma, her experiences, and how it shaped her life. So welcome to Sherapy Sessions, Lauren. And thank you for being so patient this morning. And let's pray that it stays on.
If we get through it, it'll be definitely a well worth listening to episode for folks. So I'm happy to be here. And it's just an honor. You were one of the first people that the algorithm God sent to me in 2000, soon after my estrangement from my family. So maybe it was 2021 that I first came across you. And I was just starving for content that made me feel less crazy. And I see that in a lot of the comments on your work is like how affirmed people feel when someone who's educated and experienced in these dynamics can say, listen, you're not alone. This is really common, actually. And there's a way to still live a fulfilling, whole, peace-filled life, even with this much pain and loss. So,
yes. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, I thought your bio was so interesting. So you're a nurse, an ER nurse, and I just love ER shows, just so you know, like I'm a huge fan of ER shows and law and crime. I feel like they kind of go together in a way. And then you moved into a whole new area. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I kind of was, you'll hear in my story in a bit, but I kind of was primed for the healing helping roles. And so right after high school, I became a nurse, and then I became a doula, and I was like, maybe I'll go into midwifery school because I got into that whole world. And then I was like, no, I'm going to go to nutritional therapy training so that I can help people holistically with their bodies. So I did that. And then I had my own crisis of losing my family, having to walk away from my family, and my body just deteriorating rapidly. And I got back to a really great place through a modality called brain retraining and mind body work. And then I was like, okay, that's my next natural progression. You know, we usually work out of what's moving and stirring in us. And that was what happened to me. I became a mind body practitioner, which is the work I'm doing now. And it's really neat because I was always focused really heavily on the physical body, but I didn't realize how much of our mental health and unresolved trauma affects our physical body. So this field brings together both of them. And I'm doing it from a much more balanced place. When I was a young 20-year-old in the ER, I was so imbalanced with the way that I cared for people because I was just frantically trying to ease everyone's pain. Meanwhile, I had all this pain of my own that I, wasn't even aware of.
When you say that your body deteriorated, could you explain that to us? Like what was happening to your body before you got into you said it was deteriorating rapidly. Help us understand that.
Yeah. So I had chronic illness for years and it was very mysterious. And a lot of my clients are this, they don't really fit into a category that, is real clear. And I had autoimmune diseases since I was 5 years old. Like my body was very sensitive to my surroundings, even when my mind didn't know what it was perceiving. The body's so wise. And so once the relational trauma, basically, I was the golden child. And I began questioning things and not offering my blind compliance anymore. And that's when I was scapegoated. And during that season of like frantically trying to get my footing in the world, trying to figure out where I fit and who my family was and if they would take me back, I just became much sicker. So I wasn't able to tolerate any foods. I was down to like 10 foods. I was napping, sleeping like 12, 15 hours a day, chronic fatigue stuff. I had a lot of pain. I had a lot of brain fog, classic chronic illness symptoms that just kind of took over. And my quality of life was gone. I couldn't put on weight. I was just really kind of withering away.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that because I think that so many of us hold so much in the emotional body, right? That affects that physical body. And psychoneuroimmunology is such a incredible field. And I think Bessel van der Kolk was probably really somebody who came out with the body keeps the score. I'm a human design practitioner as well, which most people don't know, but you learn a lot about your body and health system through something like that in a way that I think validates sort of those things. And I've also noticed that most of us survivors are helpers. We end up in fields where we are so trained from our toxic family members to take care of other people that we end up very naturally in careers where we end up doing the same thing. Problem is like you had said, no one really teaches us how to take care of ourselves. And
That's
you can
right.
get really bad burnout. And I think our body tells us like, enough is enough. So if you're not going to pay attention to me or you don't know how, I'm going to create a lot of pain and I'm going to force you to focus on me. Right. And I think that, so many people take their illness as a separate thing from their trauma. And I think that when you can combine the two of those things, you have the greatest capacity to heal. And I think you're a huge testament to that. I think it's also really interesting that you were the scapegoat, or I'm sorry, that you were the golden to scapegoat. Right.
Yeah.
And of course, in the middle of that, is you started asking questions that were truth-based, right? Most of us that are scapegoats were the bad kid or the outcast. So how do you explain to us what that's like to go from the top of the pecking order to the bottom? And do you have siblings?
Yes. So the context is I'm the youngest and I have an older sister and an older brother. And my brother was the lost child. My sister was the scapegoat and I was the golden. And I knew that from very early on that my parents needed me to be perfect, to carry the emotional load, to attune, to be hypervigilant to everyone's needs, and to suppress my own voice, my own needs, my own desires. And in doing that, I got a golden cage. My book is called Golden Child, and in it, I talk about how I was born into a golden cage. And the imagery of that, I don't know, that might be offensive to people, but it was a cage that I never knew I was in because I never traveled far. I always did exactly what my parents expected. So there's a quote, those who do not move do not notice their chains. I didn't notice my chains because I had everything, quote, I wanted in this golden cage, all of the toys and the belongings and the material items and the parties and all of the things that a perfect little golden child could want, except I didn't have my authentic self. I was completely a role. I was like like a hologram of a person. I wasn't a real person. I was just my role. And so the golden child to scapegoat kind of pipeline is actually, you've probably seen it in your work. It's more common than I realized when it happened to me.
Oh, yes.
I thought it was an anomaly. And then I started listening and reading, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is the golden child is always kind of set up to one day potentially be scapegoated unless you can maintain your golden aura the whole time and never question the system, which a lot of us, we can't do that. We start seeing the
Yeah, I
cracks.
think your body starts. Yeah, I've interviewed a lot of golden children actually. The
Mhm.
fall is greater for a golden child into the scapegoat role rather than a bad kid to a scapegoat. Because if you were the bad kid, then you were just always bad. You didn't have any cage. What I love about your metaphor is one, I love Maya Angelou's book, Why the Caged Bird
Oh,
Sings. And then
yes.
one of the languages, I believe it's the Chinese, their book cover of my book, But It's Your Family, is a cage tilted with the door open and a bird flying out. That's how they chose to depict the cover of But It's Your Family. And
That's incredible.
I really love the metaphor, the golden cage, because it is a cage. There's no key, right? So I also look at you as, because the older brother was, he
A
was the
lot.
lost child. Then you have the what was your sister?
He used the scapegoat, the middle
The
sister. Yep.
scapegoat. And then I would also say that you were the family fixer,
Mm.
right?
I
So there has
it's
to
yeah.
be a fixer, and it's usually either the scapegoat or the golden trying to fix. I will tell you that my sibling is in his golden cage as a glutton, loving the golden cage, and he's well into his midlife. And
Mm.
but now there's so many secrets, and there are so many horrible connections between himself and my mother that there's no getting out. The
Yeah.
exposure would be too great, right? So I love that, your body woke you up. And this is what the great thing about the body is, if you're not listening mentally, your body's paying attention emotionally and physically. And so
True.
it will begin to take over. And I think that losing the golden cage, not have anything but a performative role, what was it
Right.
like for you to start to get to know yourself? And then I think we all have a different idea of what authentic self means. And I'd love to hear what yours is.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I never really answered your question about what it was like to fall
Yeah, let's
as I
talk here.
kind of went, sorry. The fall was as disorienting as could be. I was just like, if you picture free falling off of like a skyscraper, like what, where's up, where's down, what, how do I even breathe? I was just incredibly disoriented and disillusioned at the same time because this family system that I thought was this picture of health. I even called my family system like an open system because my husband was in psychology way before this happened. And we all thought his family was the dysfunctional family and mine was this picture of health. No, I just never veered from their rigid ways. So I assumed they were. But yeah, I was a mess when I started losing that role. And not because I needed at that point, it's so much more than than material as I would be with a little kid, maybe. I was a grown adult, I had kids. I needed their support. I needed their encouragement and their love. And I didn't have that anymore. I had their disdain. And so that feeling, that shift of like once you're delighted in and doted on, and you think you're close and you think you're deep and you think they actually know you. I remember just kept saying to my husband, like walking around like after a car crash where you're just kind of in shock. I just kept saying, like,
Mhm.
I thought they knew me. I thought they knew me. I was just so confused how they could have mischaracterized me when the swap to scapegoat happened so quickly. Um, and I probably, without support, I probably would have really broke, like
Mhm. Yeah.
beyond
Yeah.
potentially salvageable. It was so big for me.
Yeah. Although I was always the scapegoat, I would be used in an
Yes.
elevation way to get my sibling to worry about his position. So those doses of being seen.
Yeah.
We'll say
Yeah.
that. Were
Right.
so confusing for me. And, I stayed for 45 years in this
Mhm.
horrific abuse. Um, and my bandwidth just ran out, and I think what I see in your story too is that you and having kids, I have found, and maybe this relates to you. So just try this on
Mm.
and see if it fits. But when you actually really finally separate and individuate, which should have happened at 18 months to 3 years, nonetheless, but when you end up having your own kids and a husband, this becomes very offensive when they have had control over you because you have to move cages a little bit, right?
Mm.
And then
Mm.
they don't really like that someone else is having some level of control over you or your time, love, and attention are going elsewhere. And so they just swipe you out. Right. I
Mhm.
don't know if that is part of what happened, but I do see that as a commonality, especially with the golden. When the golden falls, as long as the golden doesn't have any life outside of those parents that golden has to curry favor to, everything's fine. But they're difficult in-laws. They tend to be low effort um, parents, grandparents, and they don't support you anymore. It's like, well, you've moved on. You kind of snubbed. And I don't know if that happened, but it is a common thing I see when the golden falls. Does that
Yeah.
relate at all?
I mean, it definitely makes sense. I would say it definitely was me giving my attention elsewhere that really got them. And it wasn't so much my kids, they were pretty high effort, actually, which is why my story is a bit unique because they really did do a lot until I was no longer following the rules. Then they did nothing for my family and my children. But I started, so the fall, the rapid decline began in 2015, actually, when Black Lives Matter was happening in America, another wave. And there was a lot of, the country was in pain, the country was groaning. There was so much happening. And it felt like it was the first time in my life as a white woman of even hearing these terms, hearing about oppression, hearing about privilege, all of these things I just didn't know anything about. And I started listening. Now, the problem with that is my family comes from a very deeply devout Christian background. And at the time, I was also in that framework of high control religion. And the system we were in did not allow for having, other narratives about America. America was only good. America was only generous and benevolent. And all of those other narratives were not welcomed. And so as I started to explore them and kind of give my ear to those people groups that had something to say and I was listening, that was actually where the first big, huge issues were because they didn't want me to direct my care in that direction. They wanted me to direct my care to the things that they cared about. And I couldn't unsee, I couldn't unhear what I was learning. I also had at that point already adopted a Black child. And so my mind was already attuned to those realities.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
felt like I needed to listen and they did not want me to. So yeah, it's interesting you say that. It was giving my attention to something they did not want me to.
It is. So they just want your time, your love, and your attention. They don't really want to reciprocate that. I just started sort of a viral concept on social media, which I again,
Mhm.
no contact with family was one, and now I've started this
Yeah.
low effort thing. And honestly, I made it up. I made it up in my office because I love neurolinguistic programming. I love linguistics. I really love how the brain receives words. And when
Mhm.
people hear neglect, even if you put emotional in front of that word, neglect is the last word the brain is going to attune to. And most people will say, well, I wasn't neglected,
Right.
right? Because we picture neglect as something different than emotional neglect. We picture neglect
Totally.
as homeless or low income, food stamps, dirty hair, not enough clothes. That's unfortunately how so when that lands in the brain, people will discount their experience and think, well,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I wasn't neglected. I can't explain. And so I was like, what is another way to say the
Mm.
same thing, but make it approachable. Or
Right.
relatable. So I came up with low effort. What I found, what I find with a lot of grandparents is, and I just recorded a video on it that will come out next week, but
Mhm.
a lot of them will be high effort toward the grandkids, but nearly
Mm.
ignore their child. And
Yeah.
now you're in this weird power struggle over your own children that makes you feel a little bit afraid. It starts to
Yeah.
feel like a divorce
Yeah.
rather than grandparents. And so I think it is really wild that the moment that you changed your belief system, that they
Mhm.
even changed their attention to your children, let
Oh, for
alone
sure.
what they were giving to you. I do think that religious abuse uh, and
Mhm.
manipulation is a huge problem in many families. I was not raised in any type of organized religion, but my father was in cults.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, my father was in cults, and I haven't written much about it. It's fairly grotesque. Um, and it's not something I think is for everyone's ears. Some of the things that I went through, but I watched him get brainwashed over and over and over. And whatever his new thing was, he wanted to impart it onto my brother and I. And these things were wild and outlandish beliefs. And luckily, we did not live very much with him. But I was always prepared that if I did have to see him, that it was like he would tell me I was his sexual partner in other lifetimes.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
And that my mom hates me in this lifetime because he's always chosen me over her. Like just bananas. Okay. And he got into like a lot of various health issues, and he nearly destroyed my gut in fifth grade. I missed like 23 days of school.
Oh my
So,
god.
um, giving me pills. But I think that being
Wow.
raised in a very organized religion, and this is not to be offensive to anybody who thrives in that environment. We love you here. But when anything, any doctrine, any dogma is used for control and abuse of a child, it does become a problem. And I think most everyone would agree that that does happen. And it can happen in cults like my dad's or organized religions. But I came up with this thing one day driving to work. And I was like, we don't come from our parents,
Mm.
we come through them
Sure.
to live our own individual life. They are a portal to get us
Yeah.
into this lifetime, right? We don't come from them. This is not an ownership thing, right?
Right.
We come through them with our own little body that is separate from theirs. So separation is already the day of your birth. You are
Yeah.
separate. Right. And I don't think people grasp that concept, especially controlling narcissistic parents. They
Right.
own you. My latest book, Lauren's got a book, and we're going to talk about her book coming up. And this is going to be a great place for her to showcase it. And you guys should all go buy it. But I talk a lot of that in my own book, is that no one owns the title to my property, and no one should.
Yeah.
This is my property, my person, right? And that's kind of what you've been sharing. And I feel like there's the immaturity, the self-centeredness of somehow avoiding the idea that your child is going to grow up and give their attention elsewhere. Is
Right.
shock. And that where's the unconditional love then? That maybe they
Um,
learn about in their religion, but they can't apply it to you if you have a different belief system. See, that's crazy making.
yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It sure is. And you don't see it until a lot of people, I think you don't see it until you see it. Like,
Yeah.
I know that in hindsight, I have connection points and people who tell me like, well, no, that's similar to what your parents did. Like when you're not in, you're out, that kind of very tribalistic mindset. And they said to me, I just didn't think they would do that with their own child. But that's what the people in these systems will do. It can be done even to their own flesh and blood, and
Mhm.
they can live with that somehow.
Yeah, I remember I had this moment of grieving the living dead. Um, my daughter was young at the time, and she was like singing in the back of the car. And I just had this moment at a stoplight where the reality hit me that my parents would rather die and go to their graves than say any type of simple, I am sorry, you were right, I was wrong,
Yeah.
and repair and watch, forget me, but just watch their amazing granddaughter grow up.
Yeah.
Right. And that was really sobering for me. Us being their own children, it doesn't factor in if they choose pride over progress.
Mm.
It just doesn't factor in. Pride will always come first.
Yeah. It was one of the questions that one of the book coaches slash editors I worked with in these 3 years of writing, she said, like, basically what you're asking with the story, because mine is narrative, it's memoir, and it's kind of
Yeah.
goes through how it happened. But what she said to me was like, you're kind of asking, how does such a thing happen? How can you do this to your child? And we kind of like sat with it for a bit and just grappled with it. And she said, because she had already heard a lot of the story, she was like, and the reality is, you're not going to get your answer. Like, we don't get to understand because our minds and hearts are not the same as theirs. And I don't want to like be so binary, but sometimes the binaries are real. My heart and mind couldn't do that. And yet certain parents can. And we're not going to be able to understand it because we're looking at it through our lens of empathy, of repair as possible, of trying to work things out. Like, and that's not the lens they have. And so
It's not.
so
It's not.
much of that grief, of just grappling with it and you're not going to get that answer of how they can do it. And yet you must accept. Radical acceptance is something we talk about a lot of just of reality, like they are, and to keep trying to like get them back. As so many people know, I'm sure so many of your followers, there's some people go back and forth many times before they finally go no contact for good.
I did 45 years of hard time. But, I don't regret it because when I knew, I knew. And one thing I write about a lot in all three of my books is we can understand them, but that doesn't have any effect on changing them. And then I think that we need to go through the trying to understand them phase. I think it's a really important phase because we come to understand that they aren't ever going to change and that reverse projection is such a problem where we project our good qualities onto them. And that keeps us in there. They end up proving to us over time, over and over and over again, that they're going to continue to care about winning over loving. That is not something I'm sick enough to understand. And thank God I'm not sick enough to understand this. So it's good in an educational way because we do so much research trying to understand. And why I wrote my books is no one was answering my questions. Emotionally immature just doesn't cover what I deal with.
Yeah.
It doesn't cover somebody who's more than willing to sadistically abuse their own child. It doesn't cover that. And I think the emotional immaturity space is so important. And I think there's a large amount of people in that space, but none of those books were helping me past a general understanding of they're self-centered, they're self-referential, like all of that stuff was so helpful until it just didn't go to that next level. And so I'm like, I don't know if I should write this book because I think I'm going to get stoned off the planet. Right. So very glad I did. But in my TED Talk, I mentioned that DNA should equate to do not abuse.
Wow. I missed that. I've heard your TED Talk, but I don't remember that. That's a great one.
Yep. DNA. That's your people.
Yeah.
That should equal do not abuse. I want to kind of segue from here into your authentic self. I find that a lot of people have so many questions about the authentic self, as if they can go study this term and just find it like a role. And I want us to dive into that, because that is not it. My idea of authentic self might not be someone else's idea of authentic self. I think we all fall into authenticity in our own way, because the word inherently says we're all different. If we're being
Right.
authentic, we're being an authentic self, then we can't be replicating someone else's,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So you get out of your cage. Okay. Taylor Damiani was just on my show, and she gave such a great metaphor. She's like, breaking the cycle is like flying a plane and building it at the same time.
Oh God. Yes.
And it's like, I thought about that and I was like, my God, that's so true. So tell us about your journey into authenticity, and how would you define it for you? And how do you think other people should pursue this?
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. I love it. So, how I tapped into my authentic self has been varied, like it is for everyone. But I think some of the things that have really helped have been like feminist literature for me specifically is just so empowering about finding your truest voice and your deepest knowing. And that has just been that language to me. I was just able to like click right into that. Like, oh, yeah, that's been there all along. It was really dimmed in different seasons, but I've always felt that. I had a eighth grade history teacher look at me. Here I am in a Christian family, very conservative Christian family. And he looked at me one day and he's like, "You are a fiery little feminist." And I was so excited about this word. I never heard it before. And I brought my little word home and I gave it to my parents and I said, "Look at my new word. Look what he called me." I thought this teacher was like incredible. He was so smart. And my parents were like, "Oh no, that word is terrible. You're not that word. That's not a good word." And I tucked it away and it, floated away, but it somehow stayed alive in me of just this fire that was always there of who I really was and my passion and my belief in advocating for other people was there. And now that I don't have these kind of puppet strings on me, I'm able to let it be expressed in a more natural, non-performative way. And for me, that's just a big way my authentic self comes out, is how I live in love with others, and myself being way high up on the list. Actually, the most important. My relationship with myself is the most important. And that used to be the last, because that was, the conditioning. So just tapping back into her and knowing her, and in a big way that I connect with myself is through parts work. I don't know if your audience
Mhm.
explores that at all, but parts work has been just really helpful for me to validate every part of me versus just the
Right.
parts that were supposed to be seen, the good parts or
Mhm.
whatever,
Mhm.
and love them all, even the parts that are rebellious, even the parts that are not the good girl and not the one, and the one with the big mouth and the one who wants to swear at someone when they're nasty. Like, all of those parts of me belong and they get to be here, and I get to be the head of all of them. So, yeah.
That's a beautiful way to state that, because I think that we all come into our authenticity in such different, unique ways. So thank you so much for sharing your story on that, because that's really going to inspire listeners that really relate to words like feminism or having a voice and all of those things. And so I really appreciate you sharing that. My journey was a little clumsier. I when I think about my authentic self, I'm one part so vulnerable and
Mhm.
afraid, and other parts warrior
Yeah.
and fighter. And I'm an Aries, so I've got a lot of fire to me, very driven. Um, but I have learned that it is not a perpetual state of well-being.
Yes.
And I have learned that wholeness is not a perpetual state of power or well-being. I have
Mhm.
some really bad, dark fucking days.
Mm.
And I can wake up in those and still understand that the inner child voice is the voice behind every other part that is me.
Yeah.
and that I love to allow that aspect of me to have her days, to have her spirals, and to not any longer judge that as I'm broken or I'm not
Right.
mentally healthy. I just am like, oh, look, girlfriend's having a moment, like the other day, I'm driving to work. This is real. So humility is probably a huge part of my authentic self and humor because I think we have to laugh at ourselves. I truly am like the dumbest smart person you'll ever meet in your whole life. And I find that so celebratory and so funny. I can hardly walk on air. It's been bananas, but yet I'm an incredible athlete. It's really cute. So my daughter got into an incredible university. She got into a top 10 university in the nation.
Wow.
And so, college expenses, I'm a single mom and my boyfriend and I've been together 9 years, but we're raising kids in two separate counties.
Yes.
And I'm loving my little life. My daughter's 20 now, but I was
Beautiful.
driving to work and this is what happened. And maybe I watched too much Law and Crime. That could be an issue too. But I'm like, okay, well, I can afford that, be like this much a quarter and it's going to be fine. I mean, I had myself freaking out about affording it by myself. And what I came down to, the money wasn't the issue, was the by myself and not wanting to ever let her down and wanting to be able to pay for it, not take loans. All those things were going through my mind. And somehow by the time I got to work, I'd lost my license and ended up in jail.
Wait, what?
Yeah. I just went down some random spiral and then I got to work, tried to get out of my car with my seatbelt on because that's cute. And then I just
Uh-huh.
started laughing. I'm like, that was cute. Like, that was wild. Like, what did I just do to myself? And how did I get there? Like, that's almost creative. It's to the point that it was like creative. I was like in jail. I'm like walking in, laughing, like I watch way too much Law and Crime. Like, I need to scale back a little, right? And I got to work and I was like just laughing with myself, not even
Yeah.
at myself, but just
Yeah.
laughing with myself. Like we all do this. I mean, I don't know that we all end up in jail in our spirals, but I did. And could I survive there? How would I adapt? Whole thing. So I think when you get into your authentic self, it's like every aspect of me is accepted. I used to
Yes.
be scared of certain parts of me. I don't have that anymore. I think
Mhm.
age, I'm 54 now. With age, there is just a certain amount of, if you're a grower, that you just,
Yeah.
you're used to life, you know how life is. And I love that I have these parts because I can tell these wild stories about like what really goes on in my mind sometimes. I'm like, that's insane. And all just due to a fear of security when I boil it down. And I was writing about it in my journal, and it's like, I'm okay. I'm just fine financially. I can absolutely afford everything my daughter's going to need all
Yeah.
by myself without that family who cut me
Yes.
out of my grandmother's will that was left for my daughter's education.
Wow.
Okay. So, I mean,
Mm.
money was essentially stolen. It was from my grandmother to my daughter, right? That's how it was supposed to be used. My grandmother was the first female to graduate as a surgeon in New York City. So
Wow.
she loved education. My grandfather was also a doctor and he was in World War II. But so the way that the trust was set up, and I'm sure you read that in my book, but I got cut out of that trust, but that trust was meant to educate my daughter. So that trigger hit. And I just went, we're obviously like way worst case scenario that you wouldn't be able to go to college because I'm in jail.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
it's funny if you can find the humor. I think it's helpful. And I do think that I'm as vulnerable as I am warrior.
Mm.
And I
Yeah.
would say that my inner child is just always going to have that room to be the voice behind most aspects of my person. And that who
Mm.
at the end of the day, I always have to take care of is that fear-based self that I've
Yeah.
got. So I think that my path into authenticity was like, wee, but I have arrived and And every day I do feel like the last 10 years, well, my rebirth day is June 12th. I will be of no contact for
Oh,
9 years. And
wow.
I could not be comfortable in my authenticity until I stopped the poison.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
And I knew you would say yes to that, Lauren, because even if you have a small drip
Right.
of that brainwashing coming in, it still is going to go systemic,
Yeah.
right? And I love, and I want every listener to understand that your path to authenticity won't be mine,
That's
and it's
right.
not going to be Lauren's. It's going to be yours, who you are. No one can tell you what authenticity is. You have to find that for yourself.
Yeah.
And so go on your journey. What are some suggestions you have for people to start
Mhm.
locating? Like you did parts where
Yeah.
I did my astrological chart, I did my human design chart, I did all
Mhm.
the psych tests, the Enneagram,
Yeah.
um, I did the Myers Briggs. Is there anything else you would suggest to people to look at?
Oh man. I would say start moving your body. Like find a way to move your body. Even if you have chronic illness, I just had to start moving again. I had frozen up and just my outer freezing kind of mirrored my inner freezing. And when I just started, like I would roll out of bed and just like move on a yoga mat in the briefest of motions. And as I started getting back into my body, I was almost like, oh, I'm here. Like I'm here. It kind of makes it impossible to be dissociated when you are in your body. It gives you this pathway out, I will say. So find a way, whatever possible way you can do to move, and then to do it like with people. So there's also that connection piece,
Bella.
to do it with music. So there's inspiration, like the ways getting back into my body has just brought me back to life in a way that I kind of laughed at the idea of beforehand. And now I'm like, oh, I get it. It really does empower you. It helps you
Oh,
get
yeah.
in touch with who you are, you know? And another one would be like art, and don't write that off if you're not artistic, because I don't consider myself artistic either, but getting into people's stories through art, like music, shows, movies, podcasts, um,
Even reading.
reading. I mean, I have just consumed stories because it's like when we can see ourselves in other people,
Mhm.
that we're just
Mhm.
made to be relational creatures and we need each other's stories and they need ours. The whole world, we need to share our stories. And that was such a huge part of me figuring out, oh, like you said, I wasn't trying to mirror another person. You cannot. We're all our own fingerprint, separate from anyone else. But when we see someone else living their authentic self, aligned with that, it gives us permission to, and we just start to come alive. And obviously, if you can do that in person with real people, that's amazing. But sometimes our circles are so small and we've lost so many people that we have to almost kind of rent out people in movies or shows or books or songs, because it's like a safer way to connect before we're ready to like get back into real relationship with like real life people.
I love that because I have so many superheroes, and I've talked about it in probably too many of my shows, but Annie was my superhero as a little girl because I lived with the heart of an orphan. And she was so much more confident and fearless than I was. And so
Yeah.
confidence and fearlessness were two things that I wanted to learn. I wrote for Entrepreneur Magazine as one of their top writers for about 5, 6 years. And I wrote one on developing character. And what I really believe is that happiness isn't something we have, it's something we do. Motivation isn't something we have, it's something we do. Confidence isn't something we have, it's something we do. So when you see someone that has those traits and you're drawn to those traits, that
Yeah.
is your authentic self pulling you towards something that you can now practice.
Mm.
Right.
So
So I
good.
live I live one word every year. I used to live a word a week, and now I live a word a year. A word a week was a lot. I was young, I was 27. Okay. I'm like, oh, I'm getting a PhD. I'm gonna live a word a week. Yeah, that was way too much. But I live a word a year, and I would say that my most favorite word that I've ever lived was composure.
Wow.
I grew up under really emotionally reckless parents, 9 marriages between them, um, acting out, passive aggressive, out of control. So I never really learned composure. And I ate with composure. I walked with composure. I talked with composure. I did everything that year with composure. To this date, one of my most favorite words. So there's so many ways to find your way into your authentic self. Um, and I feel like it's really empowering. Instead of setting a bunch of goals every year, I have all my people choose a word and you just live that word. And I have the word that I'm living this year all over my house. It's in my car because I forget, just like anybody else, you get busy. And it reminds me that this is something I can do. I think people like even bravery, it's not something you have, it's something that you do. Don't wait to be brave. So I think that whatever you're drawn to, um, draw yourself there. And I do agree and I appreciate your comment about movement. I've been an avid athlete my whole life.
Mhm.
A very elite athlete. I was at the Olympic Training Center for figure skating for most of my childhood in the summers and heavy other duty camps and being trained by Olympic champions like Robin Cousins and, really, really an incredible thing. That took me out of the pain and I could fly and moving my body. Even though I love to run, perimenopause makes it a little more painful, but okay. And I walk every day with my dog. I think having animals also can be very curative. There's
Huge.
so much
Huge.
unconditional love, right, to come from your animals, your fur babies, and your little family. And get a farm. I don't know, but I do think it's important to whatever you're drawn to,
That's right.
bring yourself there. Because Lauren, you're really inspiring, and I think a lot of people in the big political, crisis that we had and COVID and all the things,
Yeah,
it broke up a lot of families.
it did.
Um, but I look at it like this. I try not to blame it on anything political. I think that when something's meant to end, the universe will end it. And you're not going to have a lot of choice in that ending. And so I look at it as a life class. I just want to pass this thing. I want to do my best in the class to learn and to grow. And there's lots of ways to look at life or how you're doing it. I look at this life as just a big classroom for my
Mhm.
spiritual, emotional, mental, uh, physical evolvement, right? Everything is an involvement opportunity.
Yeah.
Um, Tell us a little bit about your book that's coming. What is your goal for this book? What's your dream for it?
Yeah. Um, I started writing like 3 years ago after I read a bunch of memoirs and I just kept saying, no, I'm not going to write. I'm not going to write. It's too unlikely to like make it happen. The stats on getting a book actually to the market is so unlikely. So I was just being realistic about it. And then my authentic self was like, no, we're writing this book. And so I just started and it's been a crazy journey. It's been super therapeutic for me. It's brought me back to life and also like nearly killed me at times.
Oh, yes, girl, I
This
know.
was um, so difficult. But the
Mhm.
book is a story for me and it's a story for other people. I wrote it for all of us who need the story of the golden child specifically. It's called Golden Child, My Descent to Scapegoat and Rise to Freedom. And
Love. Well,
the story, I think, is there's a lot of golden children losing their golden status. But I think also scapegoats, like people, like you said, like yourself, who kind of were always down that scapegoat path. I think it's
yeah,
relatable too, because the second half of the story is my new identity that my family gives me. I don't own it, but I am the scapegoat in their minds.
yeah.
And I just, I feel like it's important to every time we use our voice to tell our stories, we empower other people to do the same.
Hmm.
And as we know in this field, sharing our story is incredibly healing and transformative. So my hope for it is for the people who really need need to see that it's possible to lose nearly everything and still survive and actually find a more fuller version of yourself on the other side of that tremendous loss. That's my hope.
Well, I want us to leave the show on that note because that's such a beautiful hope. And I think that memoirs are so personal. My first book was a memoir that I self-published. And one of the books that affected my life the most was Educated. And that's a
Yes,
memoir. And
me
I think
too.
it's just such a brave thing to do. And I'm so happy for you. And any way that I can help support this book or getting into people's hands, you just let me know
Thank
because
you.
I really feel that your journey is important. And I think that your message of telling your story is so important. So to everybody listening, you don't have to write a book to tell your story. There's
Right.
so many ways to tell your story, but I
Yeah.
almost didn't tell mine.
Mm.
And let alone did I really want to do that in writing, or let alone did I ever really want to become a public figure because I'm more introverted. But I would tell you that I am really glad that I did because I
Yeah.
had no idea how not alone I actually
Right.
was. So,
Truly.
Lauren, thank you so much for your patience this morning with the power going out, and it lasted. So, I appreciate you coming on the show. I adore you. I think you're doing such incredible work, and the listeners are just going to get so much out of this. And
Mhm.
you're just a gem. So, reach back out when your book drops, and then
Yeah.
we can do a little promo for you. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining Lauren and I today on Sherapy Sessions. And until next week, be well and take care of you. Well, Bravehearts, that concludes our amazing Sherapy session for the day. Please sign up on my email list at drsherrycampbell.com so that you can be in touch with me and see what's going on in terms of what I'm offering soon, what books are coming out, etc. Talk to you in a couple of weeks.